This is Tom Phillips from While Heaven Wept, and you're listening to Metal Wani. Greetings.
Hello, Tom. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's a busy time because the album was just released. So, as you can imagine, it's chaos, but of a good kind. So, doing well.
So, it's 25 years in completion and, the release of the album. And, how are you and the band feeling, amongst everything that's happening? How is the band doing?
I think everybody's pretty happy, excited. Uh, you know, it's always special when we actually receive our personal copies of the records. And just today, I received the gold vinyl edition that
Oh,
was exclusive to Napalm Records. So that one, that's really special. So yeah, we're very excited. Um, we're pleased with the general reception so far. Curious to hear what our fans actually think, um, and looking forward to getting ready for some shows next year.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot going on.
Okay. And, it's been 3 years since your last album, Fear of Infinity. I'm sure the fans were really excited for the new album. So, how has the response been so far? I mean, does this like really overwhelm you guys as the band?
It's always a bit overwhelming because there's a tendency for it to come in a tsunami, basically, of responses. And so, you know, the thing is this is the most important thing for us is when we leave the studio or the mastering facility, whether or not we feel like we've accurately conveyed everything that we were striving to do, um, musically, production wise, emotionally. Um, and then also, did we do this music justice? Because there's often a bit of a difference between what we hear in our heads and what it actually manifests on the recordings. But in this case, I think we felt that it was the closest that it's ever been to what we heard in our heads.
Okay.
And because of that, you know, um, that's the most important thing. That's the real success. Of course, we want people to respond positively, but we really can't be too concerned with critical response and things like
Absolutely.
this.
Absolutely.
It's important to not be swayed or influenced, to ensure that whatever we're doing is purely coming from the heart and soul, as opposed to catering to um, the critics or the fans, for that matter.
Um, you know, all said and done, the album is out. The fans love it. We love it.
That's
The,
fantastic.
the
That
great
makes me happy.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the album. It was brilliant. But anyway, the great thing is that, it's chaotic, it's melodic, and it has the technical elements with perfect tones, and it has these emotional parts to it too. I have to ask, what is the story behind all of this? Like, tell us everything about the concept and the ideation of the album.
Well, indeed, Suspended at Aphelion is the first truly conceptual work in our discography, um, mostly because it's one song divided into 11 parts,
Parts.
basically. So, as far as the storyline, I think first we need to look at the title, and Aphelion is a term used in astronomy, and that's the point at which a planet or something is the furthest away from the sun.
Oh.
And so this is, of course, a metaphor. Um, in this case, the sun could represent basically anything that we aspire to, sincerely and deeply, any kind of dream that one might have, goals, aspirations. It could be anything for anyone, whether it's a spiritual pursuit, romantic, philosophical, trying to obtain the true meaning of life, or achieve sobriety, any number of things that which we pursue with all of the strength, hope, faith, and energy that we actually have. Um, so that's largely what the front part of the record is speaking of. Maybe the first three parts,
Okay.
but ultimately there's a realization that sometimes, despite all of our best efforts and all of our resources, some things just remain out of our reach. And this is surely a shocking and gutting realization. So there's a cycle of emotions that transpires, much like the cycles of bereavement, where you have the shock and disbelief, denial, anger, sadness, all on the way to an ultimate acceptance. And so the majority of the album is a journey through those emotions, and it does reach a point of acceptance. However, in this particular case, there's kind of an underlying sadness
Yeah.
as well. It's a little bit bittersweet because um, you know that this aspiration is impossible. It's unreachable.
Mhm.
Yet there's still a yearning for it nonetheless, and that's what Suspended at Aphelion is all about, really.
It's actually something that's really relatable to, most of the people. I mean, everybody does feel exactly what you just said. So I think that's a really good thing, and it's really important, for there to be a link between what people. I mean, there should be a connection between what you listen to and what you feel. So I think you've
Absolutely.
done a great job with that.
Well, the thing is that it always stems from a very personal and very real journey.
Yeah.
The thing is that this whole concept is really more of an oral diary of my own journey, as with all of our records. So, and that's why the emotions are so vivid, I
Yeah.
suppose.
You know, um, it has 11 tracks. Like you said, there's one that's divided into 11. And, from start till the end, my ears just didn't give out. I mean, it was just so perfect. And, this is one thing that you guys have always managed to maintain. Now, how does the band make every track work like that? I mean, what's the writing process, especially on Suspension and Aphelion?
Well, the truth is there is no writing process. It
Oh.
actually all has to develop naturally through revelation. It's kind of, it sounds a bit cosmic, but uh, the fact is that we don't exert any effort as far as um, any kind of writing, lyrically or musically. It all has to just happen. And sometimes it feels like we're puppets, on some celestial strings or something.
Wow.
And it's like my fingers just moved into directions that I would have never, if I was thinking about it, I would have never done that. It was the music itself pulling us in different directions, and it just really unfolded chronologically the same way that you hear it on the album, for the most part. You know, it's later on after the entirety has been kind of, I guess I always refer to it as the exoskeleton has formed. After that, there is some effort exerted for sure in terms of distributing the music to the different instruments in terms of the arrangements. Um, and when we get into counterpoint and some of these other classical forms and techniques, that's when we really have to think about it, because it's important that each individual instrument has a voice that could stand on its own.
Absolutely.
But the music itself, it just kind of comes out this way, and it always has. I think that if we actually intentionally try to write something, it would probably be terrible, So I don't know, but it's not something that I want to pursue, because the root and heart of WHW is, it's based on emotion and revelation,
Yeah.
and so anything that is taking away from this, is thinking about things too much, or even at all in some cases, I think it would be detrimental to the final result. The one thing that makes While Heaven Wept different from a lot of bands is it's not about a genre. It's not about any kind of style. There's no boundaries
Yeah.
other than those that we've established ourselves. I mean, we're certainly not going to release a pop album or something like this, but or there will never be the sudden hip hop element.
Yeah.
But beyond this, we kind of just let things be what they are, and Suspended at Aphelion is no exception. It's kind of an entity unto itself. I mean, even for us, it was a little shocking, because it wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't necessarily as heavy as some of the other things that we've done,
Yeah.
but we embraced that rather than shunning that, because there was so much magic involved. It was just something really special, and we just needed to let it be what it would become.
Yeah. I think that's how the band achieved to attain the wonderful dynamic experience, with the peaking variations in the album. I mean, the ambient keyboard effects and the moody symphonics, and that's what you guys always toy around with, and really clearly felt it in the entire album. But still somehow the album has a more bombastic feel to it. I mean, what are the other things that you tried differently in this record, compared to everything else that you've done?
Um, there's a lot of things that were different, and relating to that clarity and having those peaks and all of that technical stuff. The fact is this album is the first album that was recorded in standard tuning,
Okay.
so that's gonna give it um, a very different timbre compared to some of the other albums in the past, because pretty much from 1989 until now, almost everything was recorded two whole steps lower. Um, so that automatically tends to make things heavier. Another thing was, it was very important to us to ensure this album was as organic and dynamic as possible. And this is because, um, a lot of this was first channeled on guitar, and then I transcribed it into the Guitar Pro program, and kind of developed some basic arrangements, but they were um, metrically correct. And I mean, it was like, it sounded like a computer, obviously, or an Atari video game or something like this. And from there, Jason actually took these MIDI files that I exported, and he kind of spruced it up a little bit. And here's the thing: again, we're talking about something that was inhumanly precise.
Mm-hmm.
So when Mark Zondra was actually tracking the drums, he was tracking to this MIDI information. So it was from that point forward, whatever he did was going to be the foundation for everything else that is to
Mm-hmm.
come afterwards. So when he tracked it, it's precise within human boundaries. And what I mean is that there's a push and pull, an ebb and flow to everything. It's not pro tooled to perfection. You hear a lot of stuff coming out these days where everything is perfect
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
point, like to the point of being mechanical. And so we wanted to avoid that. And so from there, all of the additional layers that were recorded, it was important that they were really performed as opposed to copied and pasted or any other of the other tricks that there are. And that's why you hear even the finger noise on the strings, the breathing. Um,
Yeah. I,
there's other things where I had Rain sing certain lines to the point of literally running out of breath to capture that
yeah.
desperation that is only possible, in that scenario. So it was very important to capture the human elements here, um, and also because we have real cellos and violins and the classical guitar as opposed to keyboards, that adds another dimension
Yeah.
entirely. Yeah, it's very real, um, and I think because of that, and also some choices that we made in the production to not try to make the album as loud as it possibly could be, it actually makes it feel larger
Yeah.
in some ways. And this is something that we noticed. If you go back to a lot of albums from the 70s, even something like, say, a Rush album, where it's just three instruments, or maybe four at some point when they brought in the keyboards, everything is so small, but yet it sounds
Sounds.
so huge. And I think that we took some references from this.
Okay.
And lastly, as far as the mastering, again, we didn't want to overly compress or limit anything. Um, we've had people reach out over the years, um, talking about how we participated in the loudness wars. And, we never intentionally did that, but um, there's a certain um, there's a certain drive at times to be competitive with other records, and largely, we would always reference everything from Black Sabbath to Green Day to whatever in terms of their productions, the overall level, and things like this.
Yeah.
Um, but perhaps some of the stuff from the mid 2000s was pushed a little bit harder than it should have been. So in this case, we really wanted to achieve something that would be more of a standard in 1977 to 1984.
Okay.
So this ultimately means that people have to turn their stereo up just a couple notches, but and it actually sounds better the more you turn it up. But that's because we left all this room to breathe, and all the
Yeah.
dynamics are still in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of differences, and there's a lot of factors that went into ensuring that it was a dynamic and organic experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you guys have been breaking progressive ground, and every time you come out with an album, there's like, a rising, expectation from every release. I mean, how does the band deal with this and prepare for it, like for the future?
Well, again, it's all about keeping it true to ourselves. We don't have a master plan or blueprint, but we're always growing as musicians and maturing as people. So that certainly has an impact. Um, we listen to a lot of music as well. We're fans of a wide array of music. So I'm sure that there are some influences, newer influences that creep in subconsciously, but at the same time, the things that inspired us the most at the very beginning are still the things that inspire us the most today. But even back then, it was a pretty diverse selection. So um, for years now, it's always just been different combinations of existing ratios. There haven't been any new um, additions, I guess, to the DNA for some time. There's some things, that, for example, a few years ago, I discovered mono from Japan, and something like this undoubtedly is kind of seeping into the music in some capacity because it really resonated with me. Um, and then there's another a more recent discovery. It's a duo from Tennessee that go by the name Hammock, which is extremely lush and beautiful music that it's out of this world, really. And I think that is also kind of absorbed into what we're doing. But otherwise, it's still all about that early Fates Warning, the Viking era Bathory
Yeah.
stuff. Some of the 4AD bands like This Mortal Coil and Dead Can Dance, Cocteau Twins, a lot of classical music. It's always been in there. So, it's just a natural fusion, which is, further strengthened by the fact that all of the musicians involved have actually played in other bands or still play in other bands of all of these styles, from jazz and classical to death, black, doom, progressive, classic metal, all of that. It's in our it's like our history, and it's part of us. So it's a natural thing for these different elements to fuse and surface in different ratios each time. But like I said, it's not as if there's ever um, a conscious decision. It just is a natural evolution. I mean, I know what's coming next. If that's like what some people are wondering, and I'll tell you this: it's there was an album that came between Fear of Infinity and Suspended at Aphelion that we actually passed over, um, and that is a very different album from Suspended at Aphelion. It's absolutely a metal record. Um, so, that's something that's going to be coming.
Wow.
for sure.
Wow.
Just because um, I think there are probably people out there wondering how we went from Fear of Infinity to Suspended at
Yeah,
Aphelion,
definitely.
and because of this, it's also recent material, not quite as recent as the Saw album, but between 2009 and 2011, it's all newer material compared to any of the other records, which often delved back into archives, over decades. So it's something that needs to happen, and perhaps an even better answer to your question.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
I can also tell you that there's new music that's been developing since Suspended
Wow.
at Aphelion that is different. Once again, it's much more progressive in a lot of ways, even more adventurous harmonically, and if anything, it's the natural follow up to what we've just realized, um, and there's a heavy King Crimson element to it. That's for
Wow.
sure.
Wow. This is like it's really good news for, everybody that's following the band. I mean, they know that they're going to get, another gift right to them very soon.
Oh
But
yeah, we really want to try to follow this up, and deliver that as soon as we can. I mean, there's literally an album that's just waiting to be recorded at this point. So I think we talked to Nuclear Blast about trying to release them within at least 18 months of each other,
wow.
um, because we have to consider any touring and things like this, as well as the time it actually takes to track the records themselves. And we don't want anything infringing upon Suspended at Aphelion either. I mean, it's literally just come out, and
Yeah.
the average sales cycle, at least in the larger scope of the music industry, is about 12 months,
Yeah.
and perhaps even longer in underground music terms. There may be people, despite technology and the internet and whatnot, there are likely to be people still just discovering Suspended at Aphelion a
Yeah.
couple years from now, and there's certainly people that are just now hearing While Heaven Wept for the first time,
Yeah.
despite how long we've been in existence.
Yeah. So, talking about touring, what's the plan now?
Well, uh, we're certainly not going to be doing anything in the winter. That's the one drawback of the album coming out so late in the year. Um, we're not really keen on traveling in winter conditions because, in this case, when you have melodic vocals and
Yeah.
especially a world class voice like Reigns,
Yeah.
we can't really risk
Yeah.
him
Absolutely.
getting sick or something like this. And it's inevitable when you're going through multiple airports and things like this.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, and plus, chances are we're probably not eating as well or getting enough rest on the road. So it's better to wait until after all of that has passed. So what we're looking at right now is, uh, spring 2015. There'll be several different things pursued ultimately. I think what we're still discussing it right now, but the gist is we're looking to do a shorter run in Europe first, and covering some territories that are geographically more removed, like Greece, for example,
Yeah.
or southern Italy, and then coming back later on to focus more on the mainland.
Yeah.
Um, and probably in the autumn after festival season. And at this point, it's kind of all up in the air. There could be some open air things happening during the summer festivals, and we're looking at the U.S. as well. I know we're going to do an extensive U.S. tour, but that usually is secondary to anything happening in Europe or otherwise. Um, we'd certainly intend to reach as many new places as possible as well. Um, that's one of the ambitions this time around. In the past, a lot of our itineraries have revolved around specific festivals where there may be a proximity clause preventing us from doing other shows, or we were supporting another band and it's their tour, so we don't really have a say in the itinerary. But this time around, there'll be some headlining dates,
Okay.
and we'll definitely make it a point to reach a lot of locations that we haven't yet.
So is India on that list?
Absolutely. The thing for us is this: is we're open and yearning to have the opportunity to perform everywhere that we can, and India is definitely no exception. It's really a matter. It's as simple as a promoter reaching out to us or to Rock the Nation, our booking agency, and making something happen. We would love to do that. I mean, you have to understand that I am a huge fan of Indian cuisine, and I'm very passionate about traveling and being a traveler rather than a tourist.
Wow.
So, um, yeah, that's certainly an aspiration. And again, it's really just a matter of someone reaching out to make it happen. We're totally open to it.
Okay. You've also been in this band for 25 years, and the band has seen a lot of hardships and everything. So, how do you think everything about the band has changed you, has changed the band, and has affected everything in general?
Well, it's never something that I had the foresight of. I could have never imagined that we'd be here 25 years into this. At the beginning, it was almost as if, it was, the truth is that, there was going to be one album and it was literally going to be an epitaph and that's it. you know, um,
Well,
you
we're
know,
glad that didn't happen.
yeah, well, I had a very complicated youth. Those teenage years, there was a lot of internal turmoil, and there was a lot of loss and confusion and
I
depression.
understand.
So, the thing is that as things evolved, um, it's hard to uh, remain mired in darkness and negativity when there are such powerful responses to the music.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily mean the accolades or um, the largely positive reviews. I mean, we've been very fortunate in that there really hasn't been a single release that was universally despised, for
Yeah.
example. But
Def.
but the thing is that what's really more important than any of that is over the years, and we have a very direct connection with our audience.
Yeah.
We're totally available to anybody that reaches out in any capacity. Back in the day, we were responding to every letter by hand, and
Wow.
still to this day, we respond to every email. I mean, sometimes things slip through the cracks, but for the most part, we're very engaged with the audience,
Yeah.
and there are people that have reached out over the years that share very personal, intimate details about their lives, from struggling with relationships and divorces, deaths, um, the people that are learning to live with um, an incurable disease, or who are being bullied in their schools, things like this. I mean, even people that have reached out, speaking of how some of our music was played at funerals of their loved ones. I mean, these are unbelievable things, and um, that's the stuff that really matters.
Yeah,
And the fact that we can impact lives in that capacity, that's why While Heaven Wept still exists beyond my own personal needs for catharsis. What really matters and what really keeps things going is that impact and of making a difference in even one life. I
yeah,
mean, that's huge. That's the greatest gift there possibly could be, beyond anything else. Fame and profit and notoriety. I mean, all that stuff. It really has nothing to do with what While Heaven Wept is about.
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure it's great for some people, but and we certainly want to reach as many people as possible as well. But it's those individual stories that really have the most impact. Um, so of course that's going to change people on a personal level too. There's a greater sense of responsibility, and in some ways self-worth, because it's really something special to know that someone out there doesn't feel as alone in their struggles, because they know that I've lived through it, or the
yeah.
band in general has experienced it as well. So that's a powerful thing.
That's really, that's really, really nice to know about all of this. It makes the music seem much more clearer, and like we can see the band in a new light now. But
Well, it's all, like I said, it's all about real life experiences,
yeah,
and it's sincere. It's always been from the heart and soul. And um, the thing is that not everybody out there wants to face their struggles head on. A lot of times people listen to music to escape their troubles,
yeah,
and to make them feel better. But the thing that people need to realize is that despite the um, crestfallen nature of a lot of our discography, the fact is, and probably the most important thing to take away from it is, I've already lived through it by the time we're channeling it into a record. I'm on the other side of it. So, despite the inherent darkness and melancholy that's often associated with our music, I'm on the other side of that, and that's giving hope. To people. I would, that's what I want. I wish that that people take away from it ultimately. Maybe you relate with it and you really empathize with all of the tribulations and struggles through those journeys, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
yeah. Okay, so coming to a final question. Describe suspension at Aphelion in just one line.
Um, the most dynamic and epic album of 2014.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. It was so nice talking to you. Um,
Indeed. Likewise. Thank you for the opportunity.